October 1907, New York was gripped by fear. Crowds gathered outside banks. Investors rushed to sell their stocks, and across Wall Street, millions of dollars were disappearing by the hour. The American financial system was unraveling. Newspapers warned that the panic could spread across the entire nation. Yet the fate of America's economy would not be decided inside the White House. Instead, it would depend on a single meeting inside a private library in New York. Behind its locked doors sat the most powerful banker in America, a man whose decisions could move markets, shape industries, and influence the future of a nation. His name was J.P. Morgan. To understand how J.P. Morgan became the man who saved America's financial system, we need to go back several decades, back to a time when the United States was still a young nation, a nation expanding westward, building railroads, opening factories, and laying the foundations of what would eventually become the world's largest economy. John Pierpont Morgan was born on April 17, 1837. At first glance, his future appeared almost predetermined. His father, Junius Spencer Morgan, was already a respected banker with powerful connections in both America and Europe. But privilege alone could not explain what J.P. Morgan would eventually become. As a child, Morgan was far from extraordinary. He suffered from frequent illnesses. Long periods of sickness kept him away from other children. While others spent their days playing outdoors, young Morgan often found himself reading books and studying on his own. Those years shaped him in unexpected ways. They taught him patience, discipline, and perhaps most importantly, the ability to think independently. His education took him far beyond America. He studied in Boston, Switzerland, and Germany. He learned languages, mathematics, and the principles of international commerce. At a time when most Americans rarely traveled beyond their own state, Morgan was already developing a global perspective. It was an advantage that would later separate him from nearly every competitor on Wall Street. By the time he entered the banking world, America was changing rapidly. Factories were rising. Railroads were stretching across the continent. New fortunes were being created almost overnight. The Industrial Revolution had arrived. And wherever industries expanded, money followed. Morgan understood something many others did not. The greatest fortunes of the future would not be built by making products. They would be built by controlling the flow of capital behind them. When J.P. Morgan entered the banking world, America was growing. But it was also deeply unstable. The nation was rich in resources. Its factories were expanding. Its population was increasing rapidly, yet beneath the surface, the economy was a mess. There was little regulation, information traveled slowly, and financial panics could appear almost overnight. A single failed investment, a bad harvest, or a sudden loss of confidence could trigger a chain reaction across the entire country. For ambitious businessmen, this environment created enormous opportunities, but it also created enormous risks. Morgan quickly realized that America's greatest problem was not a lack of wealth. It was a lack of organization. Everywhere he looked, he saw chaos, especially in the railroad industry. During the second half of the 19th century, railroads were the arteries of the American economy. They carried coal, steel, food, and millions of passengers across vast distances. Companies that controlled the railroads controlled the flow of commerce itself. Investors poured money into new railway projects. Speculation became rampant. Before long, too many companies were chasing the same profits. Competition became brutal. Railroad owners slashed prices in an effort to attract customers. At first, consumers benefited, but eventually the situation became unsustainable. Profits collapsed, companies accumulated mountains of debt, and bankruptcies spread throughout the industry. Many financiers saw disaster. Morgan saw opportunity. Unlike most bankers, he wasn't interested in short-term gains. He wanted stability. He believed that stable companies generated predictable profits, and predictable profits created lasting wealth. So instead of simply lending money, Morgan began restructuring entire corporations. He forced competing railroad companies to negotiate with one another. He reorganized management teams, cut unnecessary expenses, and convinced rival executives to cooperate rather than destroy each other. The process became known as Morganization. For struggling companies, it often meant survival. For Morgan, it meant influence. A lot of influence. Because every successful reorganization expanded his network of powerful business leaders, and with every crisis he solved, his reputation grew. Soon, investors began viewing J.P. Morgan as something more than a banker. He was becoming America's financial referee, the man called upon whenever an industry spiraled into chaos. But railroads were only the beginning. A much bigger opportunity was approaching. The largest corporation the world had ever seen. And in doing so, cement his place among the most powerful men in history. By the end of the 19th century, J.P. Morgan was already one of America's most powerful financiers, but he wanted something bigger. Much bigger. Steel was transforming the world. Railroads, bridges, factories, and skyscrapers all depended on it, and the king of the industry was Andrew Carnegie. When Carnegie began considering retirement, Morgan saw an opportunity. In 1901, he completed a deal worth $480 million and created United States Steel, the world's first billion-dollar corporation. Wall Street celebrated, but critics accused Morgan of creating a monopoly. Then came the Panic of 1907. A failed market speculation triggered fear across New York. Depositors rushed to withdraw their money, stock prices collapsed, and the American financial system stood on the edge of disaster. There was no central bank, so the nation turned to J.P. Morgan. Inside his private library, Morgan gathered the country's most powerful bankers, organized emergency loans, and forced Wall Street's financial elite to cooperate. Slowly, confidence returned. Banks remained open, and the panic began to fade. Many newspapers called him the man who saved America. But the crisis exposed a dangerous reality. The stability of the American economy had depended on a single private banker. That realization led directly to a historic reform. In 1913, the United States created the Federal Reserve System. Its purpose was simple: stabilize banks, manage the money supply, and prevent future financial panics. Ironically, the man who showed America why it needed a central banking system was the same man who had temporarily filled that role himself. Later that year, Morgan traveled to Europe. His health deteriorated, and on March 31, 1913, he died in Rome at the age of 75. But his legacy endured. He reorganized industries, built giant corporations, and reshaped the relationship between finance and power. Supporters saw him as a savior of American capitalism. Critics saw him as a symbol of concentrated wealth and influence. Both were partly right, because J.P. Morgan's story is not just about money. It is about power. The power of finance. The power to shape industries. And the power of one man whose decisions helped build modern America. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more documentaries on history, finance, and the people who shaped our world. And before you go, be sure to watch the video on your screen now. Thanks for watching.